Welcome to the Choir Conductor podcast. Each episode features a conversation with people in the choir or music education profession. I am your host, Zach Thompson. Let's start the show. My guest today is James Kevin Gray. He is a composer and music minister in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. I have been involved with his music as a performer for the past several years through Vox and the Young Voices of the Carolinas, which we talk about in this episode. But more recently, I was a singer for a virtual choir that David Tang and James Kevin Gray put together for his new composition called Look to the New Day. And we were talking about that throughout this episode. I will leave a link to a YouTube video of that initial recording for the Sharon Presbyterian Church. And I will also update that new recording in this episode once it is released. I'm excited that this podcast is continuing to grow. There are listeners now in 35 of the 50 United States, and the following countries have been added on the list. There is Denmark, Belgium, Taiwan, and Benin, which is a country in Africa. It's pretty amazing that there's people all over the world listening to this and all across the country of the United States. My goal is to get at least one listener in all 50 of the United States, and for there to be listeners to continue to grow throughout the world and to continue to add more and more countries throughout time as we go. I would love to hear it from everybody that is listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube. You can go to my website, which is zachthompsonmusic.weebly.com. You can fill out the contact information there, whether that's just to say hey, or if you want to be a guest or know that of someone that would be a great guest, you can fill out the contact information there. Without further ado, my guest today on the Choir Conductor podcast is James Kevin Gray. James Kevin Gray, welcome to the Choir Conductor podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're able to do this. Since I've lived in the Charlotte area, I moved here maybe 6 years now. I've lived here for like a year and a half and then moved to Florida, and now I'm back in the Charlotte area, which I'm happy about. But since I came here, I was introduced to your music through two different groups, really, through Vox, which you've worked with, and the Young Voices of the Carolinas.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's great that I'm able to have you on as a guest. So thanks so much for that.
Charlotte's a lot. It's a great city. There's a lot going on here chorally.
Yeah. I mean, for the city, the size of the city and the location, there's almost an unlimited possibility for choir people. You're almost never going to run out of things to see, opportunities, groups to sing in, once everything goes back to somewhat normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, this is a great place for choral music, and you play a part in that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be able to be part of it and work with, again, so many fine groups. I mean, two of the people you mentioned, David Tang with Vox, he is so creative. You couldn't ask for any better. And Sandy Holland is just a miracle worker with children, not only musically, but the discipline she instills in them and the order. Just two great individuals that you mentioned their organizations earlier.
Yeah. So why don't you start by telling us, let's say, 6 months ago, what were you normally doing in the musical world? And then we'll get to kind of what you're doing now.
Gosh, it seems, I'm trying to think, can I remember back that far? It doesn't seem like normal time.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I do, my calling, what I do every week, is I work on worship music. I am the minister for worship and music at St. John's, and that keeps me very busy. We have a wonderful choir. I get to work with an incredible organist. We have a children's program. We have a bell choir. Um, And so I oversee all of that. Uh, and I'm lucky in that I get to write a lot of music every week. Everything from anthems to chants. Sometimes when you read about Bach, and I'm not comparing myself with Bach, well, kind of, but I'm a much lesser, way down the scale Bach. But I think as a church musician, you have to produce something every single week. And you're always, you have all these scriptures and prayers, and you're always looking for music to break all these things up. And quite often you don't find the music you're looking for. So I write a lot of it. So that's what I was doing 6 months ago, plus working on just a few projects here and there, one of which I just finished. And David Tang and I are working on that project. David Tang, myself, and my friend Michael Miller partnered together to hopefully soon we're going to do a virtual video premiere of Look to the New Day, which I look forward to hearing. Trying to think if there's what else I was working on. Since I'm always working on 4 or 5 pieces, some of them it takes a long time to finish. Sometimes they happen in a flash. So, but that's what I was doing 6 months ago,
Right. And
preparing for Easter.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it seems, 6 months ago seems almost like 6 years ago at this point.
It does.
Which is everything's totally different. So, music minister, composer, how much time do you think you would say you spend on the composing side versus the music minister, music director side?
I would probably say I spend 80% of my creative energy in the ministry side of things. And that's a lot more than just music. I mean, obviously that's planning the entire worship service, also spending time with people and trying to help people however I can. And I always though try to carve out at least 20% of my time to compose. Sometimes as a composer, you have dry seasons where there's not much to work on. I've I've become okay with the fact that sometimes I may go a month or two and not have any particular inspiration. But usually at all times, I'm about 20%.
Yeah, I mean, if people, if anyone that's listening that is considering being a composer or arranger, if just 20% of your time, that's a lot. That's good. Like you add that up over doing that weeks consistently, you're gonna write, a lot of music doing that. So that's great.
Yeah,
And it's funny that you said, some pieces take a long time, and then some pieces like come very very quickly. For me, I've done a couple arrangements, and it'll feel like in the back of my mind I'm thinking about it, and like it's like a 6 month process, and
mhm.
then it's like a week or 2 weeks of getting it on paper. But it's
Oh,
that
absolutely.
it's that whole you just like it's just somewhere back there, always working its way through, and then you go through it. Is there any, they kind of just talk about how your compositional process, how you do things?
Well, most of the work I do is in choral music, although I love writing for instruments. But let's just talk about choral music first. Normally, for me, I am always looking for a text. I have to find some sort of inspiration. So I might be thinking about a particular topic, and then I may go try to find poems that bring some clarity to that topic. Or sometimes I have tons and tons of poetry books, and so I will just read through those until I find something that I enjoy. Once I find a text, um, I decide whether I'm going to set the whole text, or if it's a long poem, I tend to, maybe set part of it. I read it over and over and over again. It probably drives my wife and everyone else around me crazy hearing me read poetry out loud. But what I'm trying to find is the natural rhythm in it. If when I'm saying it, what are the rhythms there? From that point, the next process is I try to find a melody. There's lots of different ways to write choral music or music in general. Mine tends to be more melody based. I mean, you can write music that has a lot of effects and huge chords that are nebulous and go all over the place. And certainly you can add some of those things. But for me, I want the listener to walk away being able to hum a tune. So you have the text, you find the natural in the text. Then you find a melody that when you walk away from working on it, you should be able to remember it. That's a good indicator. If you can't remember your own tune, then you might have an issue. From that point, and this is the hardest part actually, is deciding how you want to harmonize it, whether you want to use instruments. For a long time, I did primarily a cappella music. But I think in the last several years, I've really gotten back into writing um, with not only just piano, but like this piece I'm working on now, Look to the New Day, is for piano, cello, violin, and Tibetan singing bowl. I just threw that in there.
Nice.
Because you're trying to find colors. And it's that harmonization process that takes a long time, especially if you're writing a piano accompaniment. I'm a pretty good pianist. Have a lot of mobility on the keyboard. For me, the hardest part is when I just sit down with the tune, I'm just playing. Oh man, can I play some stuff? But trying to slow your brain down enough that you go, okay, now what was I doing there?
Yeah.
Without, sometimes the answer is that you make everything a lot more kind of vanilla because that's what you end up writing. I've gotten to the point now where I will try my best sometimes to record what I'm playing, so that I don't just make it too easy for myself because it was easier to notate it that way. I really tried to say, what was I doing that I liked? And I'm going to notate all that out. Let's just figure out where everything is.
Yeah, that's a great process. So what ends up so your decisions for whether it's a cappella and with instruments and what instruments you choose, is it strictly I guess for the church it might be different. So like like, oh, I have this killer violin player, or
Mhm.
I have this and that in the congregation, or if it's just kind of just any performance and you can get any kind of instrument, how do you pick and choose?
Well, for myself, I tend to write what I want to hear. And if, say, for instance, I wrote a piece once at a church I used to serve for string quartet, oboe, and trumpet and narrator. Because I was also doing the Vivaldi Gloria.
That literally popped in my head.
That's what the orchestration that I had, and I wanted this to go be part of that same concert.
Yeah.
So when I did it at St. John's, I wanted to do it at a time of the year where I wasn't doing a big choral work that would require an orchestra. I didn't want to spend $2,000 to have an 8-minute piece of music that was just service music. So I rearranged it for organ, and I had a clarinet player, and I hired a flute player. So for 3 instruments, I was able to pretty much do the same thing. So periodically, I will rewrite pieces, which I think most composers, pragmatic composers especially, uh, and I recycle music sometimes. I have been known to recycle a piece and set it to different words if I wanted to try something different with it. Um, you know, Matter of fact, I've had some issues where I submitted a piece to a publisher with one text, resubmitted the same piece with a different text. The first time they rejected it, and the second time they accepted it.
Wow.
So you have to kind of, you have to play around with it. Handel did that all the time with music. You may hear some of his music show up in different places. So I said, if Handel can do that, why can't we?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like almost the exact same composition, you just change the words, and then
Yes.
whatever that's the reason that it's cut and accepted. How has what's your experience like, say, getting your first piece published to however many you have now? What's the whole submitting pieces for publication, and talk to me about what that's like for you.
Well, obviously, the first time you ever get a piece published, it is a moment that you will never forget. The first piece that I ever had published was by Paraclete Press, and I'd always admired Paraclete Press because they produce fine music. And so this was a piece called The Shepherd. The text was a William Blake poem. I mean, you don't get much better than William Blake, incredible poet, artist, uh, uh, person. So Paraclete accepted that piece. What I found, what I have found is the more pieces you have published, I think the easier it is to get in the door. So, like if I'm going to send a piece to a publishing company I've not worked with, I will usually write to the editor and say, I am interested in submitting some pieces I am published with, and I list these publishing companies. And I find that I think people are a little bit more open because you have been tried and tested.
Yeah.
Um, so but you still never lose the excitement of having a piece published. I mean, no matter
Right.
how many pieces you have. And it's having a piece published is a lot of work. And it really is. The getting it prepared, putting it out there, and publishers are getting better about this, but still a lot of it is waiting because you may have to wait 3 to 6 months to hear
Yeah.
back. So you may have one or two opportunities in the year. And the best advice I could give people who are wanting to publish is if you are wanting to publish with a publisher, look at their catalog and see what they have published. Because I'd like to think it's a really beautiful version of the 23rd Psalm, but I don't send it out very often because there must be 3,000
Hmm.
arrangements of it. And it's going to be very difficult to publish because everyone already has 4 23rd Psalms in their catalog.
Right.
Uh, but if I look and see that there's not a composer in their catalog that sounds like me, uh, they've never published that text before. Um, those are good things to look for when you're submitting to a publisher.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And so, you say that they might not have any composers that, sound like you. How would you describe your sound as a composer? Are you mostly consistent throughout your works, or are they varied, or there's like a common thread that ties into them?
Well, I jump all over the place, but I think my music tends to, again, be very melodic.
Hmm.
One thing about my sound that I've been told is that I really juxtapose sound and silence. I'm one of those composers that like to take long pauses and
Yeah.
let the silence wash over people. Um, I think overall I'm fairly consistent. A lot of my music, it's not folk music, but it has the same memorable melodies, I think, as folk music or early music. I mean, I have written some really modern music. Matter of fact, I spend a good bit of time writing what I would call minimalistic music, um, but that's mainly for instruments, not for choral music. Although I would argue that this piece, Look to the New Day, started off uh, as that I'm working on now, started off as a minimalistic instrumental piece for violin, cello, and piano, and it had such a nice tune to it. I said, well, this is instrumental music. But gosh, the tune is so nice; it would make a good choral work. And so it was during COVID uh, that I wrote the text, "Look to the New Day," and the imagery is about that. We may be surrounded by darkness now, but there is hope in the future, and do not be afraid of the future. Um, Better days are coming, basically. And so I created this choral work on top of this minimalistic skeleton of a piece that was already composed 7 years ago, but I
Oh
had not
wow.
done anything with it in a long time. So you just never know. I think you kind of have to be an opportunist with yourself and go, well, I have all these, it's like Legos. You have all of these things, and you go, well, what could I do with that? Have I done everything I could do with it? Um, you know, there's that kind of writing, but I will say there are other types of writing that I have done that I would say are unworldly and inspired. There are moments in my life where I have written music where I hear it almost completely just given to me, like I'm listening to a song on the radio, and just literally I just frantically trying to get it down before it goes away. And those pieces I usually write in maybe a day or a day and a half
Wow.
or less. Um, but it happens both ways. Sometimes it is divinely inspired, I would say. It just comes to you in a flash. Other times you have bits and pieces of it, and it's like putting a puzzle together. So I'm open to both ways. You learn things from being open to everything.
Yeah, that's great. And so this look to the new day, I don't know if you know, but David snuck it into the Sharon Presbyterian church service.
I did see that.
Okay.
I really liked it. I
Okay.
did. I know
Yeah.
that's not going to be the I know that's not going to be the final version of it.
Oh, okay. I
And
didn't know. But yeah,
but yeah,
I thought it was great. Yeah,
yeah.
so he set it up as a virtual choir, which,
Hmm.
you know, there's a lot of those are happening. So I submitted a recording for that. And so, yeah, it was really fun to sing. I submitted it when I was actually at the lake. So I had to go find a quiet space, which was interesting, get everything set up there. But yeah, I agree. You know, the beginning, I really like the beginning. It's like, you know, as you said, minimalistic, kind of atmospheric, long pauses. And then you get this almost folk or kind of more upbeat
Yeah.
sound to it in the middle, and then you kind of bring that back at the end. The more minimalistic, it's a nice kind of, you know, mood for our times now. There's times that it's just you're just really heavy, and then there's like, oh well, maybe we're gonna get out of it, and things are great, and then it's you know, come back, it's heavy. But yeah, I thought, you know, the original or this first recording sounded great, so I'm really looking forward to whatever is gonna come up. Do you know what the next step is for that?
Well, we're actually after listening to it. Actually, we're getting ready to make some edits, and this is the strange thing that you can do with technology. Used to if you had a piece recorded, it was what it it is what it is. But I was listening to it, and I called David and I said, David, what do you think about? I said, when the choir comes in after the big minimalistic introduction, I feel like it comes in too loud and too fast. Is there any? I said, there's no way possible that we could actually decrescendo. I mean, have the singers crescendo in just a little bit by little bit. And could we start it 15 tempo clicks slower and over a period of 10 measures, accelerando into the tempo we want? And he said, yeah, we can do that. So I'm eager to see how that transitions. It is amazing with technology. Used to you'd have to get all the singers back into the studio to redo everything, but that's not the case now. If you have a person like David who is so good with technology, I mean, he's not only he's great with technology, but he has such an artistic mind. He's just a real pleasure to work with. Um, yeah, I don't know exactly when the final product will be. We're working on it for another project. I don't know that I can talk about
Sure.
it yet.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
It's going to be premiered, I think, maybe in August sometime. So
Okay. Yeah, so what I can do, so the listeners, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'll do is I can link to Sharon Presbyterian's YouTube post that they did, and I'll timestamp it so that it goes right to yours. And if, you know, they can watch the rest of the service if they want to,
sure,
but they'll get kind of an idea. And then once the newer recording comes out, I can send an update through the episode link as well. So
sure.
if you're listening to this sometime, you know, recently, or you know, even it might even be out by the time I end up publishing this episode. So that's great. And so how did you start to become a composer? What made you want to first write a song?
Well, I started playing the piano when I was around 4.5, and so music has been something that has been part of my life my entire life. I do remember though. probably wanting to write music around seventh or eighth grade. And part of it came from studying the life of Mozart and being fascinated by these human beings that create that from nothingness create something. So I started working on some things then. At the time I was in band. In high school, I switched to chorus. Uh, but I guess I really started to get serious about writing when I was in a senior in high school. My teacher said there's this scholarship, the state of South Carolina, for composers, and I know that you write. Would you be interested? And I said, oh well, I'd give it a shot. So I wrote this piano work that was about 5 minutes long, and I was one of the semifinalists, and they gave us a poem and said we could set it any way we wanted. And it was a poem by Archibald Rutledge called Nature's Blessing. And so this was the first time I'd ever really written anything except maybe some piano music. But I wrote for chamber orchestra and choir and soloist. I decided I'd just go big or go home.
Wow.
And I had a teacher in the area who helped me coordinate all of that and record it. Her name is Diane McFarland. She still teaches in Seneca High School. That was the neighboring high school for me. I went to West Oak. But I ended up, my first time ever really writing music for someone besides myself, I ended up finishing second in the state. So I was happy with that.
Wow.
From that point, I went on to Winthrop University, and I took composition for 5 years there. I was one of those 5-year students, which is strange. People think when you're a 5-year student for your undergrad that you goofed off. I actually took 21 hours almost every semester, but I was in 3 choirs.
Yeah.
I took everything I could possibly take.
Most people have no idea like what a music major has to go through. Yeah, it's like same thing. I was doing 18 credits per semester plus taking stuff like non-ensembles for non-credit, summer hours, and like and your friends that are like a business major, they have like 5 classes. You're like, oh, okay. And then they complain to you
all the time. Yeah, and
Sorry,
part of it was
keep going.
these ensembles you take, you're rehearsing 3 times a week for an hour and a half, and you get 1 credit hour.
Yeah.
So, when you're taking 18 to 21 hours a semester as a music major, that translates into a lot of classes. But I had 3 different composition teachers over the 5-year period, and I learned something different from all of them. My first teacher, Dr. Whiteman at Winthrop, she really loved kind of avant-garde music, very contemporary composers. And she introduced me to music that I would have never chosen to listen to by myself. And there was always a lot of pushback. The first time she started playing Stravinsky for me, I said, I really don't like this. But, I said, for instance, The Rite of Spring, the first time I listened to it, I really didn't like it. The second time I listened to it, I really didn't like it. By the 15th time I listened to it with a score in my hand, I really started to like it.
Yeah.
And I would say that now it's on my top 10 favorite pieces. So she taught me to push the boundaries of what I think I might like. My next teacher, Dr. Bruce Thompson, he come from a very long line of composers. As a matter of fact, if I trace my composer tree through him, his teacher's teacher was Hindemith, and it goes all the way back to Bach. So
wow.
In that. But he was very old school, wrote all sorts of music, everything from neoclassic to very contemporary. But he taught me to stand my ground about my voice. So I would bring in a piece of music, and he would say, "Okay, now these measures here, what are you trying to say there? What is the point of that?" And I would try to say, well, I think it's because of this and that and the other, whatever the piece was. And then he would usually always do this. He would go, "Now that sort of sound," he said, "I'm not saying it's the same, but it's the same principle and idea as this composer." And he would go over to a big shelf full of scores, and he'd pull out a score. We would pull out the score, and we would look at how that composer navigated that kind of composition. So I
Wow.
understood the importance of a score study from him. And then, I think my last teacher that I had was Rob Hutchinson. He was very pragmatic. I think he was a working composer. I learned a lot about how to, just put like Legos, put it together. He was very good that way. And even though he wasn't, two other people that I had that were great influences on me, Dr. Robert Edgerton taught me everything I know about writing choral music. He was the director of choral activities at Winthrop for over 30 years and an incredible arranger. And he was so kind. Sometimes when the day was done, I would knock on his door and come in, and he would look through my music, always give me good opinions. Or when he was working on a piece that would later go on to be a very successful piece, he would say, "Pull up a chair and let me show you what I'm doing." And I would watch him work, and he would talk to me about his process. And the other person I think is Dr. David Lowry, who's since also retired. But he would give me a score and a recording most weeks, and he would say, he said, "You're serious about being a composer?" And I'd go, "Yeah." He said, "These are works that you need to know. So listen to them next week. Let's meet." This is just extra curricular. This is not for my class.
Wow.
This shows you the effect that teachers can have. And he would say, "Okay, let's get together next week and let's talk about it." So we did that with lots of. He was the first person to ever pay me, to commission me to write a piece, and I was 20 years old.
Wow.
So I had excellent teachers, and part of, I think, being a composer is to get to the point where you don't want to be anybody except yourself, and trying to figure out what your voice is and what it is you're wanting to do with your music.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you have such wonderful teachers. They're all giving their different perspectives. That's pretty amazing that your one teacher, last name Thompson, great name by
Yeah,
the way, um,
yeah.
that he was just able to instantly think, oh, it's this from this page, this composer, this measure,
Well,
and
he had a
then
mind like a steel trap. I took theory from him and oral skills, and sometimes if the train went through Rock Hill, he would smile or go over to the piano, and he could hear all the different tone clusters that made up the sound of that horn, and he could play it.
wow, that's
I can't
fantastic.
do that. I don't know if
No,
I need to do that, but he had some. His mind's like a computer. It really is.
yeah, it's a cool party trick, I guess.
Yeah.
um, and so you went for composition.
Actually, I
One,
was a music ed.
oh, music good.
I was a music ed person. Composition, I took voice was my instrument, although I'm a pianist.
Okay.
Um, Composition was just I took composition along with
Oh,
ed
okay.
degree, and I was certified band, orchestra, and chorus K through 12. So it was a pretty expansive degree,
Yeah.
which could also
And
explain 5 years.
right, yeah. And so what did you do after you graduated?
After I graduated, I started working at the Clover School District. I don't know if you know about Clover, but they're incredible. Their high school, now it's been 16 years since I worked there. My son is coming through the program now, um, but that program, I put the high school program up against any college choir in the country. They're
Wow.
they're incredible. But I worked in the junior high school program, and I also worked as the assistant at the high school. So I was really just submerged into the choral world, constant teaching, constant rehearsing, and I learned so many lessons. And the person was the director when I was there, and still the director, is Jay Forrest. Um,
Okay. And what
and
town is
so
this in?
Clover. It's a small
Clover.
little town right past Lake Wiley, South Carolina, is part of that school district.
Okay.
Um, and
I've been
so I did
to
that.
yeah, I've been to Lake Wiley. Does it go into North Carolina?
It does. So there's a bridge that separates the North Carolina part from the South Carolina part. But
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Very nice. Sorry.
so I did that.
Okay. And then what led you to go full-time music ministry?
Well, I had been doing part-time church ministry all halfway all through college, and also while I was teaching, because I really loved the music of the church. And I woke up one day and realized that I had everything a person at age 27 could want in a choral career. I was in the finest choral program in South Carolina with a great teacher, uh, but there was something, it wasn't the right fit for me. And so, I'm a person of faith, and so I prayed about it, did a lot of meditating and thinking about it, and I was led to the conclusion that 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 strife in my life was caused by the fact that I needed to be in a church. So, and what it is about church for me is I believe in the message of peace, the message of love, but part of it is too being there every single day with a group of people for years at a time, not only talking to them about music, but being able to have really in-depth personal relationships with people, sharing in their celebrations and sharing in their sorrow. I find that human experience also as an artist helps me find inspiration and figure out what it means to be human, because you learn a lot. You learn about what it means to be human, not just from your own perspective, but the perspective of many people. So that was my calling, and I've been doing that since 2003. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I've been at St. John's for 6 years. Before that, I was in Lake Wiley. So I started working for the largest church in the area where I had been teaching school. So I still connected to that community. Um, yeah, it was a great change, but I wouldn't take I wouldn't take away anything from the experience I had teaching school. And since then, I've still continued teaching. I taught part time at Winthrop for 3 years, doing the vocal jazz program there, and done a
Oh,
lot of
cool.
summer camps with kids and things like that. So I believe that no matter what profession that you go in, that you'd be better served if you got an ed degree.
Yeah.
It really does. It teaches you a lot, especially how to communicate to people.
Right. Yeah. Almost no matter what job you're in, you have to teach someone something
Yeah.
in order to get anything done. And yeah, I mean that's fantastic that you have this this nice, good, arching career going different places, and it's very nice to see that the Lord has called you and to be where you are, and things are going the best for you there.
Well, you get your
Um,
cake and you get your cake and get to eat it too. So I get this wonderful job working for the church that I love, but I also get to do things that, I directed the Charlotte Chorale for several years, and a guest conductor for Carolina Voices. And so, you really can have it all.
yeah, yeah. If you
You can have it
work
all.
hard, yeah, it'd be nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So since COVID-19, what have you been doing, either the day to day with music, or even just kind of weekly or monthly? What things have changed for you?
Well, there's no physical outlet much for it. As far as my church goes, we still produce a 30 to 40-minute worship service every week. Everything is video edited. So, I'm up there. The organist is playing the organ. Sometimes he'll send me that track. I overdub my voice singing the hymns. We have soloists singing. Um, so a lot of that. Um, I think for the first maybe month or so, I spent a lot of whatever free time I had. You would think you'd have more free time, but when you work at home, I find it takes more time to do than when
Especially if you have
you're going to the
kids.
office. Yeah, um, that's true. I spent a lot of time playing. I used to be a gigging musician and played in college and high school and all this, that, and the other, and for years played in bands and things like that. So I found a Facebook site called Socially Distant Fest. And basically, when you go on, there are 100 and something thousand members, and people tune in and you watch these musicians, and some of them are the most incredible people you'll ever hear. And so I really enjoyed just playing the guitar and singing for no other reason than just to play and sing. I found that very refreshing. But then I kind of moved away from that a few months ago and really got more into writing. I've been working on multiple pieces. I'm this week, as a matter of fact. I'm working on 3 pieces to send off to a publisher at the end of the week to see if I can get those through. So um, I think when the lightning strikes, you just have to make yourself available. So that's what I've been doing the last few weeks, composition wise.
Yeah, that's great. And so for the listeners and, really for me, because I'll be looking in the next year or so for new choir songs of your published works. What would you say would be maybe your top choir publication? Talk a little bit about that, and then say maybe the one that you wish more people would discover or use that's not, for whatever reason, is not as popular compared to your other works.
Well, that's like asking which is your favorite children.
Right.
Very difficult. I will say, let's contrast two different styles. I have a
Yeah.
piece published by Oxford University Press called "Little Babe Born of Mary." It's pure, and I think from an artistic standpoint, I think is one of my finest works. I really do. I'm very proud of that. I always wanted to have at least one piece published by Oxford because it's not easy to have a piece published by them. Frankly,
No.
I was surprised. But here's the story. I'd submitted that piece to them 6 years earlier, and it was refused. I changed the text, sent it to them, and they published it.
Wow.
Uh, so I would say that is Little Babe Born of Mary, Oxford University Press. If you type in my name on the computer, James Kevin Gray, Little Babe Born of Mary, you'll find things on it. You'll even find the day I got the recording, John Rudder was the producer, Bob Chilton
Wow.
was the conductor, and the Oxford Singers were the one, and that was the recording I got. I mean, I thought
That's
that was great.
amazing.
The other piece that I'm probably, from just a human being standpoint, most proud of is a piece that I wrote about 2 years ago called Safe Place. It really is more in the popular, it sounds more like popular music. I would say something, I would love for Lady Gaga to cover it, or
Yeah.
Rufus Wainwright. Um, Actually, I sent it to Rufus Wainwright, and he said that it was beautiful. He was getting ready to go on tour, so he didn't really have time to work it into anything. But he said if he ever changed his mind, he would contact me. I thought that was,
That's pretty cool.
yeah, or at least that's what his assistant
Yeah.
sent me. You don't email him personally. You email his assistant.
Right.
So that kind of music. But this piece was written about bullying and what it's like to be in a situation as a child or an adult where you don't feel safe. Um, the lyrics start off, when I was a child, my mom would hold me close. She whispered in my ear that I'm what she loved most. But waves came crashing in the year I turned 13. The world I loved so much became a place of suffering. But after you lay out the difficulties, the choir comes in and sings, "You are not alone. I am with you. You are not alone. I am with you." And when I wrote that piece, I was inspired by a young man who got up from our church and talked about what it was like being bullied. He was a dancer, and sometimes as a male dancer in school, you get picked on. And he shared what that was like. And that's what inspired that piece. I wrote it. I told him that I was going to dedicate it to him. I sent that piece to Hal Leonard, and this is crazy. I sent it directly to the senior editor, the choral senior editor. I sent it to his Facebook page. I said, "I think you're going to really want to publish this." I said, "Normally I would send this, the the chain, not the
Yeah.
chain
Yeah.
email, but the correct." But I said, "I would love to get just give me your opinion on it." And he said, give me an hour or two. I need to have some people listen to this. Within like a day and a half, he said, "We're going to publish this because this is an
Wow.
important message." That piece, I started getting a lot of Facebook messages and emails and things from people, and some of the performances. It's one thing to write a piece is artistically beautiful, it's another piece to see people come up where they're crying and they're sharing their stories with you. I get emotional talking about it, but being part of bringing comfort to people, it's to date, I think it sold more in 3 months than all of my other pieces. It sold, I think, because I think it hit a nerve. Of course, then COVID came, and I haven't gotten a royalty check since then. But it sold a lot of copies. Now, obviously, I mean, I'm happy about that financially, but that's not the most important thing. What made me happy was that it connected with people, and that I wrote it SAB and SATB so that junior high school kids, middle school kids, college kids, high school kids could sing it. That's the piece I'm probably most proud of because I think it has made a difference. A piece that I wish more people would sing. I've actually had a good number of people sing it. I just wish more people would. Is a piece that I wrote called Canticle of the Virgin with Paraclete Press. It's such a beautiful text by Maurice Maeterlinck. Maurice Maeterlinck, Canticle of the Virgin. Even before you hear my piece, just Google it and read the text. It's really beautiful. It just talks about that when love is completely manifest, that no sin or nothing bad can even exist in the presence of overwhelming love. That it's all washed away by overwhelming love. It's a beautiful piece. I dedicated it to, I was happy also to dedicate it to my best friend, who has been my best friend for 26 years.
Wow.
And I really do want to say a few things about him because he has helped me so much. He lives in Seattle now, has for 11 years, but he works at a church. He lives an exactly mirrored life just like mine. We do the same things. He's a composer. And we talk every day. We have for 26 years. So the
Wow.
first person I ever let hear any of my music, always have since college, I'd say, Mike, I've written a new piece. I want you to listen to it and give me your honest opinion. And I know that he will. We're real honest with each other about it. And so when I had that piece published, I said, I really want to dedicate this to my friend. So if you don't know Michael Austin Miller's music, you should. He's an incredible artist, incredible human being, and has, I would say, closer than a brother. I mean, he and I, we just get along so well.
Yeah.
Everyone should have at least one friend like that.
That's great. Was he the one that did the video introduction for the virtual choir that we just did?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
and
Okay.
when David and I talked about it, I said, I'm getting to work with you, David. You're one of my favorite people, and I said, let's just make this wonderful. I want to bring my friend Michael into it. That way, I can work with two of my favorite people. So yeah, Michael was the one that was conducting also in
Okay.
the video where you watched. So he conducted and he did the introduction video to explain the
Yeah.
music because I knew that he would understand the piece because I talked to him about it as I was writing it.
Sure. So yeah, I'm gonna try to reach out to Michael and see if he'll be a guest on this podcast.
Yeah,
Sounds like he has a lot in common with you, and I'm always looking for more people to talk with. That's great.
absolutely. He's a good one.
Um, yeah, that's great. And so, kind of wrapping things up, what advice would you give your younger self?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I would say get your technique down, which it takes a while. So when I was younger, you get tired of learning how to write harmony. You just want to do your own thing. So I'd say, Kevin, don't get tired. Stick with the technique. Learn how to part right. Then second of all, I would say, uh, find your voice. Get to the point where you don't wake up in the middle of the night thinking, gosh, I wish that I could write music like Eric Whitacre or John Rutter. You have to get to the point where you go, I wouldn't want to be anybody except myself. And when I don't imagine, sometimes when you're younger, you kind of see these people in the spotlight and you imagine yourself as them. I think one of the healthiest things as an artist is getting past that point. It doesn't mean that you lose any respect for them or you admire them any less. but you start to see yourself as valuable and that your voice adds something to the conversation that no one else's voice can. So, you know, I would say when you write music, why are you writing that piece, Kevin? That's something else I would say. Are you just wanting people to clap? Or are you wanting to change something in the world? And the music, the things that count the most is the art that not only entertains people, but even in small and big ways, moves them toward wholeness and moves the world toward a better place. So I'd say focus on those things.
That's great
And
advice.
my younger self would say that was a long explanation, older Kevin.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If the people that are listening want to find out more about your music or even maybe get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
I do have a web page. If you just type in James Kevin Gray, you can find, I think it's jameskevingraycomposer.com. But if you just Google my name, lots of stuff will pop up and you'll find my web page. And I have an email on there. I also don't mind giving you my email that I use for composition is jkevingray.composer.com. I think it's the one that we've emailed back. I don't mind that being publicized. Anytime, any place, people can email and ask questions.
Right. That's great. Do you have anything final that you want to say before we wrap things up?
I think I've said plenty. I think I really have.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I will be sending out all the links that we talked about in this episode, and I hope that lots of more people will find your music and have some really powerful emotions and it affect their lives for the better.
Thank you. I really appreciate this time, this opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Choir Conductor podcast. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave a review. Go to zackthompsonmusic.weebly.com for show notes, an archive of podcast episodes, and free compositions. Have a great week.